Night in the Woods is a narrative-focused game set in the post-industrial, partly dilapidated town of Possum Springs. You play as Mae Borowski, a recent college dropout who decides to return home in search of relief through the familiarity of her friends, family, and hometown, effectively trying to relive her nostalgic image of the past. From the day she arrives and reacquaints herself with Possum Springs and her friends, namely the excitable and slightly whimsical fox Greg, the wise and level-headed bear Angus, and the depressed yet deeply caring crocodile Bee, you, and Mae, receive more mysteries than answers. The simplistic art style and gameplay loop of guiding Mae to aimlessly explore the town makes strange narrative occurrences and moments of character insight revealed through extremely human dialogue all the more poignant. All of these carefully crafted clues create synthesized drops of vibrant disruption to the expected normalcy of Mae's new and, unexpectedly, unfamiliar life. At its core, Night in the Woods is a game about nostalgia, the inevitability of change, and how they both tie into legacy. Through the contrast in how the older and younger generations of Possum Springs confront the problems facing their town, the game comments on the destructive potential of nostalgia and the overwhelming power that change holds. After realizing the extent to which change affected everything she knew and loved while in college, Mae undergoes both an internal and metaphorical external conflict with the sentiment of destructive nostalgia that characterizes the town's older generation. But in finding balance within herself, Mae's story offers a lesson in how our legacies can remain steadfast in the face of the unwavering past and the inevitable future. Mae's return forces her to confront her own legacy, the expectations and memories she brought home, and how they clash with the lives her friends have built. When she ecstatically reunites with her old group of friends, they initially reciprocate her return with excitement, well, with as much excitement as they can muster while working behind a counter. But as she goes to band practice, eats at a restaurant, and gets up to mischief with them, just like the good old days, she starts to understand just how large the disconnect between her and them has become. Due to work, Mae's friends no longer have the freedom to do whatever they want during the day, and they often don't enjoy her freedom during their nights either. Some of the optional activities that Mae can spend with her friends are as dull as going with Bee for a work house call or going to the grocery store. Though Greg's optional scenes seem more childish and playful than Bee's, Greg eventually reveals that he's choosing to leave work early and get up to his antics with Mae to escape the reality of his adult life. After starting a relationship and graduating high school, both Greg and his boyfriend Angus have been stuck working minimum wage jobs for years, incrementally building towards their goal of leaving Possum Springs for good. And though the two are happy that Mae came back, Mae jeopardizes Greg's relationship with Angus by distracting him from what's most important to him, his and Angus's futures. In Legends, the last scene in Greg's route of the plot, he bluntly states, "I have to grow up a bit. I did grow up a bit. Mae, you have to let me change." Bee dreams of the same escape by pursuing a college education like Mae had, yet her mother's death forced Bee to stay in Possum Springs and manage her dad's business with unbefitting pay and workload, leaving her no hope of pursuing her dream anytime soon. But as Mae acts childish in forgetting the death of Bee's mother, refusing to admit a valid reason for leaving college, and making herself Bee's problem after having a drunken breakdown at a party, Bee realizes that they live in two completely different worlds now. While Mae yearns to return to Possum Springs, her friends strive to achieve a better life by climbing out of the hole that Possum Springs' legacy has dug itself into. As the game unflinchingly confronts Mae with her newfound immaturity, the player, through other gameplay elements like choosing through Mae's limited set of dialogue options, is confronted with Mae's immaturity as well. When arguing with Bee about her situation with managing her business, Mae's two options of what to say are very confined to her naive worldview, thereby making Bee even more upset no matter what you pick. At the end, the player only has the choice of picking the redundant options of "you always have a choice" or "you can always choose," paradoxically contrasting Mae's naivete with the reality of the gameplay. The way the player has to jump around on electrical lines and high ledges to explore the Possum Springs environment is also reminiscent of a child at play, and on top of that, the game explicitly teaches platforming to the player in a playground. Additionally, the player must continually and cyclically move from right to left through the center of Possum Springs to continue advancing the plot. Considering that Western culture deems time to directionally travel from left to right, just as English is read from left to right, this spatial quality of the gameplay could be representative of regression, symbolizing all at once Possum Springs' stagnation and May's regression in maturity. As May realizes how much of a burden she is to her friends' livelihoods, she's forced to confront the truth that Possum Springs is not the nostalgic image of her childhood that she wished to return to. Possum Springs and her friends had grown up, and they'd grown up without her. In parallel to how I previously demonstrated that May's personal legacy, the memories of her youth and how it influenced her expectations, strains her relationships with her friends, the town's collective historical legacy also traps May, her friends, and her generation. Myriad details that saturate Possum Springs hint at its legacy as a town. In the bus station, the very first space that the player finds themselves in, a large mural dominates the space reading Historic Possum Springs, established 1795. The mural depicts the sun shining down on a green and orange landscape, sporting abundant forests, a flowing river, a minecart full of coal, a statue of an armed soldier standing proudly, and a steam train behind the statue. Another mural, displayed in the trolley tunnel underneath Possum Springs, depicts caricatures of miners in astute, heroic poses, ready to go to work for the prosperity of the town. A large memorial stands in the middle of the town as well, proudly saluting those from Possum Springs who contributed to a historical war effort. The spaces of the game make an effort to physically remind you of Possum Springs' past as an industrial, patriotic, and historically rich town, in the same way that American work murals of the Great Depression era were commissioned to depict themes of labor, industry, and the American dream. However, the present state of Possum Springs that we see in the game echoes the narrative of stagnation that traps May's friends and the rest of their generation. Many areas, such as the barriered-off playground at the beginning of the game or the abandoned food donkey, hint at the subtle reality that Possum Springs used to be less dilapidated and more civically developed than its current state would suggest. Even the places that evoke the mythos of Possum Springs' past aren't safe from degradation, as seen from someone vandalizing the large mural in the trolley tunnel. Upon witnessing a worker's mural at the entrance of the town's library, B remarks that these historical murals that glorify the bounty of Possum Springs are now more like murals that mourn what the town could have been, tragically framing how devastated the town really is. Hidden away in an abandoned storage area, the player discovers another remnant of the town's past. The space has bare metal and brick walls with retired signs leaning on them, packed boxes lining the floors, and building infrastructure that's usually found in janitorial closets as opposed to public spaces, like exposed pipes. The features of the space and May's dialogue reveal that this area contains the hidden-away remains of the annual Spring Parade, which the Possum Springs Town Council ended when an accident occurred with a float in May's childhood. This float, endearingly titled Mallard P. Blooming Row, can be found in the next room over, broken down and laid to rest. The retirement of the parade stands as a metaphor for the internal threat that Possum Springs faces. By keeping the town sterile of any incidents that could potentially look bad to the public, the older generation destroys the culture and future of Possum Springs' residents, continuing a vicious cycle of failing to revive their perceived image of its glorious past. Narrative clues about the Possum Springs police force and town council also suggest that the town's older generation is a group that doesn't truly acknowledge the destruction they cause in pursuing the past. In two separate instances, the town council members remarked that getting the attention of the market is their primary job, as if appeasing this omniscient market, rather than focusing on the current poverty of the town, could fix everything. And in the face of crazy occurrences like a literal severed arm just appearing on the street, the police force's investigations seem to turn up nothing. And they know something weird is going on too. May's aunt, Molly, eerily warns May not to go out at night, as folks like her are at risk. I'll address what that means later. A missing poster of May's former friend, Casey Hartley, also remains forgotten on the town bulletin board. No one even cares to talk about his disappearance anymore, electing to believe that he must have just left the town to fend for himself. One of the council members even produces a giant promotional poster reading, "Possum Springs, more like Awesome Springs," which completely covers up Casey's missing poster with its sheer size. Yet, Casey isn't forgotten. He's ignored. When the player first learns about Casey's disappearance at the diner, the music suddenly transitions to a soft piano theme titled, "Where's Casey?" But this theme recurs as a leitmotif in Night in the Woods' soundtrack, featured prominently in some repeatedly heard tracks like the Possum Springs and title screen themes. Just as the player is constantly reminded of Casey's disappearance through sound design, the people of Possum Springs never truly forget Casey. They elect to believe that Casey left the town on his own free will, because that's what had to have happened, right? It's the truth that they have to believe. Everyone's ignorance of Casey's disappearance, especially from the people who are paid to care about it, speaks volumes on the town's inclination to ignore the negatives of the present. The Possum Springs Town Council and police force's failure to improve the town represents the negligence and ineffectiveness of the older generation to do anything in the face of the town's changing civic and economic conditions. On the night of Harfest, May's favorite childhood celebration, May finds herself isolated as her friends scatter for the night, Greg with Angus and Bee occupied with business. But soon, that becomes the least of her worries. In rapid succession, the scene transforms disturbing relics of the past, the severed arm, Casey's disappearance, and now this abducted Harfest child, into harbingers of a brutal present. Even Night in the Woods' gameplay expresses May's torment with what she's witnessed. The camera at the left bound of the Possum Springs explorable area used to stop at the fence, but after the Harfest kidnapping, May cannot help but look upward toward the forest, where the kidnapper disappeared. But as it turns out, the very same cycle of destructive nostalgia is responsible for forever changing May's perspective on her hometown. Those responsible are a cult of frustrated townsfolk who worship the Black Goat, an eldritch entity that promises to bring back prosperity to the town in exchange for, you guessed it, sacrifices. They believe that sacrificing some members of the younger generation, whom they essentially view as useless to the town's growth, is a necessary evil to bring a better future to the town. Of course, Casey is among these victims. Now it's clear what May's aunt meant by folks like you, unemployed, dependent youth like May. May and her friends witnessed their dangerous desperation firsthand on their first night in the woods, where they encounter the cults killing their own member, revealing the extremity of the nostalgia problem in Possum Springs. Bee, Greg, and Angus were arbitrarily deemed safe from the cult's judgment as they'd immediately gone to work and grown up out of economic necessity, no matter what they wished. It's a simple ideology. Terribly simple, and a perfect personification of the destructive nostalgia that characterizes Possum Springs. As the poem at the beginning of the game eerily echoes, they feared death, so they ate the young. Yet, despite the disgusting nature of the cult's methodology, despite their killing of Casey, and despite what May has personally witnessed, May listens to the cult when they claim that the Black Goat sings to her in the same way. May always claimed that the presence of a cult member was supernatural somehow, that she felt it. And the one time that she encounters a depiction of the Black Goat, she just stands there. Why do I know this painting? It's like she's staring into the sublime, into a void that threatens to consume her. The Black Goat, whether metaphorical or literal, has been haunting May this whole time. So they offer her to join them, to have her legacy become theirs. Yet, after May and her friends escape the cult's lair and May fights for her life as she's almost killed for a third time, she still responds with sympathy. I think I get it. May understands the cult members' nostalgia for the past, and their hopes to secure a better future for Possum Springs by keeping the status quo, resisting change no matter what. After all, her decision to leave college lined up with their ideology. Returning to a nostalgic version of Possum Springs would, in her mind, help her achieve a better future. Though May knew that Possum Springs wasn't perfect and even falsely advertised, as per her own words, she still trusted in her friends and the town's culture to stay familiar. Yet, her friends did change. They grew up, and her memories of the town's culture were made into abominations through the cult's activities. The night that May went to the party in the woods and made a child of herself is the night that her strange astral dreams and mental episodes started. As May slowly realizes how emotionally dependent she is on her friends, and how that holds them back now that they've changed, the increasing frequency and intensity of her episodes coincides with her fear of change and emotional growth. In other words, the moment she starts to recognize that Possum Springs is no longer the same, and that things can no longer go back to how they once were, she starts hearing the call of the Black Goat. The Black Goat, therefore, is a metaphor for nostalgia and her, and by extension our, desperate sentiments to resist the inevitable. Change. The Black Goat is not the only metaphorically rich god entity in Night in the Woods. If the Black Goat represents the epidemic of destructive nostalgia in Possum Springs, then the Sky Cat, a dream entity that May contacts in one of her dreams, symbolizes the inevitable change that affects May, her friends, her town, and ultimately everything in the universe. The Sky Cat reveals itself as a deeply nihilistic and immortal creature through its uncaring attitude in labeling living beings like May as little creatures, and its view of the universe's timeline beginning moments ago and ending moments away. It only cares enough about conversing with May to cryptically warn her that there is a hole at the center of everything, and you are not escaping, and the universe is forgetting you, and the universe is being forgotten, and there is nothing to remember it. The Sky Cat's role in representing the inescapability of change and its incomprehensible scale in the universe introduces a nihilistic lens to the change that the player witnesses in Possum Springs. One of the only questions that the player and May can ask in the face of this overwhelming force of change that values nothing is, so, does anything mean anything? The Sky Cat bluntly responds that everything May knows is atoms, and that your atoms are not caring if you are existing. Your atoms are monstrous existence. While the Black Goat traps Possum Springs in a cycle of destructive nostalgia, the Sky Cat reminds us that change is not only inevitable, but also vast and indifferent. A force that redefines existence on a cosmic scale. After coming into contact with the representations of unavoidable, inescapable change and the human sentiment of self-destructive, desperate yearning for the past, May comes to a personal conclusion in her final encounter with the Black Goat. May ultimately realizes what the Black Goat is for both her and Possum Springs, and chooses to resist it. May ultimately accepts that she wants to hurt in holding on to whatever she has left, instead of returning to it, because the fact that it hurts to lose anything keeps her cognizant of the fact that it's gone. Hurting encourages her to move on and keep valuing everything she still has in her life, despite the threat of the hole at the center of everything. Of course, this perspective won't save her forever, but all she needs is for it to save her now. For it to mean something now. In refusing to join the cult's legacy of destructive nostalgia, and in finding personal meaning despite her existential crisis of being told that her and all other living things are accidental and a monstrous existence, May learns to accept it all and to continue living as herself. May's newfound growth and her conclusion to face change by accepting what's left directly carries into her influence on the communal legacy of Possum Springs. Though May's status as an unemployed adult child who aimlessly wanders around every day doesn't exactly serve the older generation's commercial idea of success, May's friends appreciate what she, or rather the player, chooses to do with her freedom. May manages to fix things with Greg and Angus's relationship, and Bea learns to accept May for who she is, conceding that they're still each other's best available friends. Even minor characters show appreciation for May. Selmers, May's neighbor, shares her short poems with May if the player wishes to hear them. But if you stick with listening at every chance you have, Selmers recites a powerful poem about Possum Springs' economic decline and publicly admits her appreciation for May's willingness to be one of the only ones that listens to her. In contrast, the elderly Mr. Penderson retorts that she was useless, explicitly outlining the differences in May's value to both generational perspectives. May still has a role to play and life to lead in the new Possum Springs, despite not conforming to the conventional role expected of her. Night in the Woods argues that legacies, both the ones that influence us and the ones that we make, aren't prisons if we learn to accept what's lost and instead address what remains. May represents this way forward. Despite the change that's occurring all around her and her wishes to cling to the past, May grows past those sentiments to instead embrace change, no longer letting herself be consumed by her predecessors' legacies. Despite everyone growing up, despite the tough reality facing her after dropping out of college, and despite the continual and inescapable encroach of the hole at the center of everything, she is still able to carry on, finding personal valuable meaning in what she still has and what she can still do. In facing her fear of change, May also recognizes that her struggle to find meaning is precisely what gives her legacy value. Perhaps what all those in Possum Springs who are stuck in the mutually destructive, monstrous hole of the town's legacy are missing is this perspective. So that is what Night in the Woods is about. Finding our balance between the overwhelming forces of nostalgia and change. That, despite what we lose, despite how much it hurts, and despite how little the universe may actually care for our loss, it's still possible to confront the Black Goat and Sky Cat within us all, going on to create our own legacies anyway. As Angus elegantly articulates, I believe in a universe that doesn't care, and people who do. To what extent should we adhere to the legacies of those who precede us, knowing that everything will inevitably change?